What is going on today, everybody? Welcome back to Fix It Garage and our Subaru WRX engine rebuild. If you guys don't remember, we are working on a 2016 Subaru WRX with some pretty bad rod knock. Yeah, that does not sound good. In the previous videos, we went ahead and we pulled the motor and we tore it completely apart. And since then, we've sent our cylinder heads out for machining and they are back. And we've actually got our new engine block sitting right there on the engine stand, ready to go. However, we're not ready to start rebuilding it just yet. In today's video, we are gonna start rebuilding the engine block, but first, we need to finish cleaning up these cylinder heads because the machine shop left me something that we need to fix. If you remember, there was a ton of carbon buildup inside of our intake valves. Well, there still is a ton of carbon buildup on the inside of our intake valves. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you a tech tip on how to save a bunch of money and do it yourself using zip ties, brake clean, and a drill. I've seen this trick on the internet. We're gonna try it today and it looks very simple and very effective. So we're gonna go ahead and get our zip tie cleaner all set up, and then we're gonna try cleaning off these intake valves. All right, so here we have our tool, our drill bit, and then what I've done is I've taken a bunch of zip ties and zip tied them together, cut the heads off and stuck it in the drill chuck with the idea that these are going to clean the valves. Now in the video, what they show is you spray a little brake clean into the valves, then you stick your drill bit in there and you clean. And the tips of this should clean the carbon buildup off of the valves. Very important thing to know when you're doing this. The valves need to be closed. You don't want to drop a bunch of carbon into the cylinders because we have our heads on the bench and the cams out of it, all of the valves are closed. So we don't need to worry about it. If you're doing something like this in the car, the valves need to be fully closed. You do not want this debris leaking into the engine. That would be bad. That could cause more damage. So we have made sure that our valves are closed and the heads are on the bench. So now what I'm going to do is spray brake clean into one of the cylinders and start using that tool to go ahead and try to clean the carbon buildup. Now I'm not gonna be able to have a camera in there easily, so I'll just put this on a tripod and I'll do it, and then we'll show you guys the end result. All right, we did one cylinder. Let's go ahead and take a look. So here's a good before. You can see all of the carbon buildup on those valves. That's icky. Here is our after. Look at how much cleaner those valves are. There's still some brake clean down in there that I have to get out, but that'll evaporate. But overall, look at how much cleaner those intake valves are compared to the other side. Surprisingly, this trick worked really well, and it is a fraction of the cost of what you would cost for a dealership to clean the carbon up. We can see the tool definitely did some cleaning based on the fact these were white zip ties and they've now changed color magically. It looks like if you use too much pressure, you can actually make the tool kind of come apart, so I might remake this and have a few of them handy, so if I damage it, I can just swap out for another homemade zip tie tool. But for the cost of zip ties, brake clean, and some shop towels and my drill bit, we clean the carbon off. This is huge. This is large money savings for somebody who wants to do it at home. This is something that any of you guys could do at home if you're rebuilding your engine. I did not think it would work as well as it did. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and knock out the other 3, and I'm gonna check back in with you guys when all of them are clean. Alrighty, so both these cylinder heads are all done. Let's take a look at all the valves and I'll show you guys just how clean they are now. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and take a look at our valves and we can see, if I can get the lighting right, look at that. Look at that, so much cleaner. And that carries on into our next set of cylinders. And then we'll go ahead and go over to the other side and we'll see more of the same. All of these valves are cleaned up and they look so much better. The difference from before and after is absolutely alarming for using zip ties that equate to maybe a couple bucks worth of zip ties and a drill bit, where a dealership would charge hundreds, even thousands of dollars to clean all the carbon off of the valves of an engine, depending what kind of motor it is. And I did it for a few bucks. Yeah, I had to pull the whole motor apart, tear it apart, but in reality, I could have taken the intake off and done this in the car. It would have not been fun, but I could have done it in the car by just pulling the intake plenum off and I could have cleaned those valves off. So it could have been done in the car, and again, for a whole lot less money than what a dealership would charge to get that carbon buildup off. It's not all unicorns and rainbows with this though. Whatever tool you're using, it's going to get very, very dirty. So be prepared to have one of your tools get very dirty, but we can go ahead and we can clean that up now that we're all done and make our tool look almost as good as new. Now that those are clean, we can go ahead and put them back on the shelf and we are ready to start assembling the new engine block. Before we move on to the engine block, I want to give a quick shout out to Humble Mechanic, and I will link the video in the description box below. But it was his video that I found that showed me the zip tie trick to go ahead and clean off these valves. So be sure to go check out his video for a more in-depth about using these zip ties. But once again, thank you to Humble Mechanic for that video. That made this process so much easier. Ta-da! New engine block is on the engine stand. Went ahead and put this engine block in off camera. And we swapped over all of the bolts that we put in the old block into our new one. That way we know where they all go when we put things back together. The only thing that we still need is we need to put in our PCV valve, which is over in our new parts sitting over there. By the way, new shelving unit for storing parts, much better than the old method. Now that we have the block on the stand, the first thing I really want to get done is I want to get the cylinder heads put on. That's a huge step, so let's go ahead and work on getting the cylinder heads installed with our new head gaskets. When installing cylinder heads, it is very important that we follow the torque procedure for the cylinder heads, which when we go to torque it, I'm going to go over that with you guys, but it is very important that we follow that torque procedure to ensure that the cylinder head is torqued evenly. Now, Subaru does one thing weird that Honda does not. They have you use some liquid gasket over in these areas on the cylinder head to help with sealing so oil doesn't like leak out from here or here, I guess. But we are gonna follow the Subaru procedure for installing these cylinder heads to the letter. I don't want any issues with these cylinder heads. All right, so it's time to install our cylinder head. And the first thing that we need to do is apply our liquid gasket. Now, Subaru has provided us with some 3-bond 1217H liquid gasket, and they tell me to put it in here and along here. So we're gonna go ahead and apply it, then put the head gasket on, and then I think I'm supposed to put a little bit more. So we put the cylinder head on, it squishes it, and it makes a nice seal. The liquid gasket on, we will now set our head gasket directly over it. Press down on it to kind of push the liquid gasket material. And now we're gonna add a little bit more. Now you guys in the comments might tell me I'm doing this completely wrong, and that is totally okay, but I don't want to take a chance on having this thing leak. So now we'll take our very nice machined and cleaned up cylinder head and set it on the block. Like so. All right, the cylinder head is now installed. We need to install our head bolts, and we have some brand new head bolts. Head bolts should never go in completely dry. I like to dip them in oil, stick them in, and then I'm gonna get them snug, and then we can start torquing them. I just have some random oil laying around the shop, so we're gonna go ahead and use that to just put some lubricant on these bolts so we don't put them in dry. The initial torque that we need to put down is 15 foot-pounds, and to make sure that the gasket is torqued evenly, we will go from the inside bolts out in a crisscross pattern. Perfect, 6 torqued. The next step is we need to go to 73.8 foot-pounds. This is going to put the initial squish and tension on these head bolts. All right, all 6 bolts are torqued. The next step we have to do is we need to loosen them 360 degrees, taking all of the tension off of our head gasket. All right, all of them have been fully backed off. Now we're going to re-torque them to 15 foot-pounds. Next step is to torque them to 31 foot-pounds. Up next, we now need to torque them to an angle, which is 100 degrees for all 6 head bolts. So I have 2 torque wrenches that both do torque to a foot-pound or whatever I want, but I also can do torque to angle. These are really nice to have if you're building engines. They're quite expensive. But as I've always said, if you're gonna spend a lot of money on tools, buy really nice torque wrenches, especially ones that can do like torque to angle. Makes it a lot easier when you're building motors. So we're gonna go ahead and torque them to 100 degrees. And the nice thing about this is if I pull and I like have to reset the ratchet, it allows me to reset and it remembers where it was. So I can go back and forth, so I don't have to like stand here and try to walk around 100 degrees. So the next step is when it starts getting weird. They want me to torque another 100 degrees, but only to the 2 center bolts. Again, Subaru, I've noticed with their factory head bolts, always have a weird torque thing. So another 100 degrees on the 2 center bolts. So now we're gonna torque the 4 outer bolts to 50 degrees. And if you guys are wondering, I'm using instructions here. And just like that, our cylinder head is now torqued. I'm gonna go ahead, put you guys on a time lapse and knock out the other side real quick. And just like that, we have the cylinder heads reinstalled. That is a huge step that we needed to get done in the process of rebuilding. The heads now being on allows us to get the cams in and start putting our timing stuff together, which is exactly the next thing we're gonna do is get our cams on and then start putting our timing chain back on. Before we can reinstall the camshafts themselves, we have to first put all of our hydraulic lifter stuff back on, which I have over here nice and neatly on the bench. First, you actually have to install the lifter piece itself. That was a good catch. First, you have to install the lifter piece itself, which slides into the head. So here's our lifter pieces. We'll take it and it just slides in like so, and we'll do that for all 4 of them for the exhaust side. Like so. And then same with our intakes. Take them and we install them. Just like that. Very easy, very simple. We'll go ahead and slide those guys on. Next thing we have to do is we have to put these guys back on. These guys sit on top of the valve. We'll take the piece, set it on top of our valve for all 4 of the valves. Check. Then we take our rocker arms, these little guys here, and they just sit on there like that. So this dimpled side goes on like that. And then this bridge sits over that. Just set it down just like that. So up next, we need to install our camshaft holder. Now, on the other side, we took off the camshafts with the holder and everything. On this side, because I didn't know, I took it off separately. So here is our piece. In order to install this, we're going to need to apply liquid gasket all the way around. I've cleaned off the old stuff. There's also 2 filters in here that we need to replace and 2 O-rings that we need to replace. All right, our cam holder is back on. We can now replace these tube seals, and then we can install our camshafts and the cam caps. So I don't know if you can, it's gonna be really hard to see, but on here, there's a E and an arrow, and the arrow points towards the front of the engine. So this is our exhaust camshaft cap pointed towards the front. So it's going to go right here because these are our middle. Same with the intake ones. It has an eye and an arrow. All right, so we are ready to torque the cams. They are torqued to 14 foot-pounds. So what we're going to do actually is we're going to torque the two center caps, and then I'm going to apply the liquid gasket to the front and torque it, and then to the rear caps and torque it, because that's the torque sequence. So let's go ahead and torque our two centers, and then we'll work on the front and then the rear. All right, so we have the cam caps on, torqued, and new liquid gasket applied. We can now install our valve cover, and then this side will be complete, and we can move on to installing the cams on the other side. All right, we have both of our cylinder heads completely reassembled. Look at that, both of them are all done and sealed up, which is really, really nice. Now we need to tackle the part that is probably the most concerning for me, just because it is always kind of scary to do this part, and that is the timing chains. Now this car runs two timing chains. You have your driver's side timing chain, passenger side timing chain. The way you have to time the engine is you have to do the driver's side first, rotate it around to a specific point, and then do the passenger side timing chain. So we're gonna go ahead and start by doing our driver's side timing chain. And what they tell us to do is have this in this position here where the keyway is facing straight down. Then we have this cam, kind of like how it's sitting, and this cam, how it's sitting. What they're gonna have us do is have us rotate this into place and then the cams into place. According to the diagram, I have them in the right spots. So according to the diagram, this pink sprocket needs to line up with this mark. This pink sprocket needs to line up with that mark. And then this dark blue one needs to line up with this little half moon right there, which it is. So according to the diagram, this is correct. Now we need to compress the tensioner. So these tensioners are identical to like Honda ones. They're a ratcheting style tensioner. So when you push on it, it will catch, so you can't lose too much tension, but if you hold it in place and then push it in, you can actually compress the tensioner. What I like to do is I like to take a pick and hold it in place and then compress it. So I'll compress it down here where you guys can't see, unfortunately, but I'll show you guys once it's fully compressed. So now we've recompressed the tensioner and we have our pick in here holding it so it doesn't pop back out. Now we can reinstall this. All right, tensioner is now installed, and there's actually a gap between there and there. So we gotta double check that our marks line up, our blue, our pink, and they do. So now it tells me to pull the pin. All right, the pin is now pulled. This now has tension on it. So then it has you rotate it till these two arrows line up, and then that keyway should be facing straight down, which it absolutely is. So now we're ready to do the other side of the engine. All right, so we have the chain on and the tensioner is fitted, but I haven't pulled the pin. We want to verify that our link lines up with the dent on the cam on both of them, which it does. And then the blue link lines up with the half moon that is directly behind it. There's a mark on that tooth and it lines up. And then these two line up and these two line up. So based on all of our colored links and everything, this is in time. And we can pull the pin, and now the engine is completely timed and tensioned. We'll tighten up these two Allens, and then we're gonna rotate the engine and make sure everything feels good. All right, and everything, when I rotate it, feels really good on this engine. With no oil pressure, these tensioners will bounce in and out a little bit, but that's pretty normal. Once there's consistent oil pressure in the engine, they will not move. And now that we've rotated around a bunch, we're gonna verify our timing by putting it back in time where these two arrows line up, the two arrows on the other side line up, and our keyway is facing straight down, which it is. So this engine is now correctly timed. So we have a complete rotating assembly and everything on the engine feels really good. So now that we have verified the engine is fully in time, we're gonna go ahead and we need to get this bottom pan piece back on that the oil pan sits on, the like girdle piece. We need to put that back on. All right, so we have the whole lower set all reassembled. We got the lower girdle and we have the pan on. We are now ready to put on the timing cover and seal up this engine. I've already replaced the two O-rings on the block and then I replaced the crank seal on the timing cover. So let's throw on that liquid gasket and bolt up our timing cover. All right, and just like that, the timing cover is now fully on. This means the oiling system, as far as all the things that need liquid gasket, is now fully resealed. And now it can sit here and it can cure. And by the time we're ready to put the engine back in, this stuff will have cured enough that we can start the motor. When doing liquid gasket, be sure to look at the bottle that you're using. I'm using some 3-Bond, that is from Subaru. It gives you directions for how long after you apply it that you can install the part, and then how long it takes for it to cure. So always be sure to check the bottle for the information when doing any kind of reseals. And on Subaru engines especially, don't use too much. If you use too much, it can break off and get into the oil pickup, plug the pickup, which will plug the pump, starve the engine of oil, and it will, well, do what you guys all talk about Subaru engines doing, blow up. So we want to avoid that at all cost. So just be sure not to use too much, but you also don't want to use too little because then it'll just leak right past it. All right, so I think we've hit a good stopping point for today. We've got the long block reassembled and we've got all of the covers back on and sealed, and they are now curing. In the next video, we're gonna go ahead and reassemble the whole rest of the engine so we can put it back in the car. I wanna thank all of you guys for watching. As always, if you like what you saw, don't forget to smash that like button, leave some comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe so you guys don't miss any future videos on the Subaru WRX or any other projects that we bring into the shop. I wanna thank all of you guys for watching. Catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.